My name is Shara Babcock. I serve Chautauqua as Vice President and Emily and Richard Smucker Chair for Education. And it is my great pleasure to welcome you to this week's Chautauqua Literary and Scientific Circle Roundtable discussion with Arlie Russell Hochschild, author of Strangers in Their Own Land, Anger and Mourning on the American Right. A couple of announcements. Please silence your cell phones and all other electronic devices. And as is our custom, Ms. Hochschild will be available for a book signing immediately following this presentation on the porch of the Literary Arts Center at Alumni Hall, which is located across the Grove from this venue. Another addendum to the book signing is that the Daily missed an announcement this morning that Arlie Hochschild's husband was to have a book signing today, and it was going to be in the author's alcove. And we're glad they like each other. They've been married for 51 years. And Adam is another CLSC author. He was here in 2001 or 2 with King Leopold's Ghost. So that book will be for sale if those of you who are reading want it to count. But also he has a new book out just this past year called Spain in Our Hearts, and it's a history of the Spanish fight against fascism. So I think we'll just have a lot of book signings over at the Literary Arts Center after this presentation. And this concludes the afternoon announcements. Today's lecture is underwritten by the Louise Shaw Van Kirk Dill Fund. Mrs. Dill was a longtime Chautauquan who served as vice president of the Bird Tree and Garden Club and was passionate about animal rights and welfare, the environment, and ecological concerns. This endowment was established by her family to support CLSC authors whose books address these passions. This afternoon's lecture is also one of this summer's designated Applied Ethics lectures in the Lincoln Applied Ethics Program, a program in its 21st year. So please join me in thanking the Dill and Lincoln families for their support as we thank all of your families who support Chautauqua. This week's CLSC selection is one rooted in an effort to recognize and appreciate perspectives that differ from our own. The CLSC Class of 2012 banner accompanying this lecture honors this theme with its motto, Pillars of Understanding. Beautiful. Strangers in Their Own Land, a finalist for the National Book Award, takes readers on Hochschild's thought-provoking journey from her liberal hometown of Berkeley, California, deep into conservative Louisiana bio country. Deciding to conduct her research by scaling the so-called empathy wall, Ms. Hochschild finds lives ripped apart by low wages, home foreclosures, and an elusive American dream. Strangers in Their Own Land answers one of the most crucial political questions of our time. Why do people who would seem to benefit most from liberal government intervention dislike the very idea? Arlie Russell Hochschild is considered to be one of the most influential sociologists of her generation. We discovered that last night when Ibu Patel stopped her on the lake and said, "I love your work and I have been reading it. I am an undergraduate sociology major." She's a professor emerita of sociology at the University of California, Berkeley, and is the author of 9 books. Ms. Hochschild's honors include Guggenheim, Fulbright, and Mellon Fellowships, as well as 3 awards granted by the American Sociological Association. This is her first visit to Chautauqua, but this time, as I said, she's traveling with her husband, who was a CLSC author in 2001. So ladies and gentlemen, liberals and Tea Partiers, evangelicals and environmentalists, please join me in welcoming Arlie Russell Hochschild to Chautauqua.
Thank you very much, Shira. That was a beautiful introduction. And you can see what a lucky wife I am that go check out Adam's books. So I love being here. This is an amazing place. And walking past the Baptist house, I saw a garden with a series of 5 statues. And one said, my name is Marimba, which means peace. And the next read, my name is Frida, which means peaceful. A third said, my name is Amena, which means peace and harmony. A final one said, my name is Faranda, ardent for peace. And in front of it was a sign that said, United We Stand. I thought, well, I'm in the right place. Let's start there. And yet, I spoke to a woman this morning who works here, and she said, you know, my husband and I live just 5 miles away from here, and I tell you, our neighbors, you know, we're liberals, but our neighbors, we can't talk to them. And I thought back to that sign, and it occurred to me what it referred to was peace between ethnic groups and national groups, and an embrace of diversity. And I thought, well, so good so far. But what about United We Stand with regard to the political divide in our country? There seems to me we're, at the moment, a little stuck. And, you know, the Rabbi, Lord Jonathan Sacks, was just talking about cultural climate change as a context for this divide. And so that's what I'd like to talk to you about today. And let me just start by asking, how many of you here have at your last Thanksgiving, where you were having relatives in, had a little problem talking politics? Okay. How many with neighbors? Okay. How many with close friends? Wow. Okay. Spouses and partners? Not so many. Okay. You know, I think that reflects the depth of our feelings about political fate of our country, and also the bubbles we live in. Because I think all of us today live in geographic bubbles, in media bubbles, because we read our media and quote not their media, and even electronic bubbles. If you open your laptop, you know, the algorithms are giving you back to yourself. And that means that we begin to, when we think of having a conversation with someone who disagrees with us, we're almost at a screen door and having a fictive conversation. Well, if I were to talk to a person, you know, I would tell them what the truth is, and they would understand. And we kind of imagine how a conversation might go. And I myself was at the screen door and having a fictive conversation. In 2011, I had a kind of a moment. I was sitting in my office in the sociology department, the University of California, Berkeley, in Berkeley, California. California, blue, blue, blue. And I thought to myself, I am in a bubble. And I don't understand people that don't think the government could be a helper, that we could have a good government that gets some good stuff done. So let me get out of my bubble and find some place, another bubble that is as far right as Berkeley, California is left. And let me take my political and moral alarm system off and permit myself the freedom to really be interested in and curious about people that I know I have profound differences with. And let me try and climb what I came to think of as an empathy wall. Let me just try that. And you know, I learned something before I even left. Because I started telling people, you know, I think I'm going to find a kind of a right-wing bubble somewhere. I don't know where, but somewhere. And I'm really going to just try and get to know people. And the reaction I got from a neighbor, for example, in Berkeley, was typical of other reactions I got. Oh, no, you're going to do what? Oh, I couldn't do that. I would be so angry. I'd be so mad. That was one reaction. And then there was another, which less frequent, but people would say, oh, you're going to the South, or you're going to talk to real right-wingers, and they kind of look at this, okay. As if to say, you know, and good luck to you, but hope you come back. But also, the idea was, well, if you're going there, you must be more like them than you think you are. You must be going for somewhere else, staying in your bubble. And I found a missing idea in both those responses. And the missing idea is that we can stay exactly who we are with our personal commitments and permit ourselves to really get to know people different from us. Doesn't mean you turn into someone else. It doesn't mean you're going to people like you. It means you're not afraid of difference and you're giving it a try. And so I set off. And I thought, well, where am I going to go? I'll go to the South. That's where the right has grown the fastest and the strongest as a region. But where in the South? Well, I thought, I looked at the 2012 returns for the proportion of whites voting for Barack Obama, his second term, and in the whole region of the South, it was a third. But in Louisiana, it was 14%. So I thought, perfect. Okay, this is where I want to go. I knew one person, and that person happened to be the mother-in-law of a former student of mine. And she was an artist and a progressive, but her best friend was an ardent Tea Party person. They loved each other. They had keys to each other's houses. Their kids were friends with each other. They went to cultural events together. They had been sorority sisters at Louisiana State University. They had a lot of in common, but huge and increasing distance. Didn't start that way, but 30 years later, that had happened to them. And I thought, what a model for the country. Let's look at this. So in the book, I described the many ways I tried to get to know people, but let me give you just an example of how it went. I started attending meetings of the Republican women of Southwest Louisiana. They're very organized, huge meetings every month. And I would say, hi, I'm Arlie Hochschild. They never got that last name, Arlie Hochschild. I'm from Berkeley, California, retired teacher, and I'm really interested in this. I'm writing a book, and worried about this divide. They would say, yeah, we're worried about that divide too. Okay? And around the dinner at the luncheon table of one of the meetings was a woman who said, I love Rush Limbaugh. And I had one of those little flips. It took me a second. You know, I'd really love to talk to you about that. Could we have sweet teas sometime this week? Yeah. So the next day, we were having sweet teas. She turned out to be an incredible gospel singer, and her husband led a large Pentecostal megachurch, and which I later went to and met a lot of people. But we were sitting down to sweet teas, and I said, okay, you know, I'm really curious. What is it that you love about Rush Limbaugh? And she said, oh, he's my brave heart, and he hates those feminazis. I don't know if you've seen any of my other books, but The Second Shift. So, I said, well, what is a feminazi? Well, it's a hard, cold, ambitious woman who puts her children aside, elbows her husband aside, just cold person. I thought, whoa, I don't like people like that either. And she then went on to talk about environmental wackos. Well, what's an environmental wacko? Well, people that carry this regulation too far. Speaking with great feeling, but after a while, she stopped and she said, is it hard for you to hear me? I know we don't agree. I'm saying things you don't agree with. And I thought, whoa, she's listening. And then I said, no, actually, I've taken my alarm system off. I am here to learn from you, and you are doing me such an extraordinary favor. I can't tell you how grateful I am to be here and to learn from you. And you know what her answer was? Oh, I do that too. I do that. I take my alarm system off when I'm listening to my children, when I'm listening to parishioners, and, you know, where you're really just trying to understand what's going on the other side. And then we had that in common, and we took it from there. And it turned out that what she saw in Rush Limbaugh was a protection, she felt, against insults from coastal liberals who would look down on her as backward. She had a 2-year Bible college education and would look down on her as part of the backward South, that would think she was ill-educated and ignorant and racist, homophobic, sexist, and she said, fat. They'd think I'm fat. So I began to turn things around here. She was braced against insult and saw him as pushing back. I learned a lot in that half hour. And later, as I said, we really got to know each other. She tried to teach me a game of cards called Rook that evangelicals play because it's not too close to gambling, but it's kind of interesting. So there I am on Wikipedia trying to learn Rook. So this was the funnest, actually, research I've ever done because the people were very real and they felt so unrecognized, so unheard, that in a way, it's not that they were hostile to me, although some began that way. They wanted their story to be told. So I went with a very familiar question. It was kind of my question, a liberal question, which is the red state paradox. How could it be that across the United States, it is the poorest states, the states with the worst education, with the worst health care, with the most pollution, with the highest traffic accident rates, and the most disrupted families, the highest proportion of single moms. and the lowest life expectancy are also the states that receive more money in aid than they give to the federal government in taxes, and revile the federal government. I mean, I was scratching my head. Wait a minute, if you've got a problem, wouldn't you like some help with it? And so you get over the problem. So that was the question in the back of my mind. And in Louisiana, I found an exaggerated version of the red state paradox. Second poorest state in the Union, 44% of the state budget comes from the federal government. And it's overwhelmingly right-wing. One survey found half of the voters in Louisiana agree with the tenets of the Tea Party, and they ultimately went enthusiastically for Donald Trump. So that was the question in the back of my head as I set out, and I followed a politician who was kind of barnstorming across the estate. He was running against a Tea Party candidate, and I would always do the same. Hi, I'm Arlie Hochschild, and I'm new here, would really like to understand, come from a blue state, so on. And people wanted to talk, I found. So, but and in the end, what I finally did was pick out certain people that I really tried to get to know. I'd say, can we visit where you were born? Which, by the way, wasn't very far away from where they live now. And could I see your school? Could we visit that? Where did you sit in the classroom, generally? And, well, my eyes weren't very good. I was in the front row, or always goofing off in the back. A lot of these people sat in the front row, and they were good students. Where did you go to church? Where were your parents buried? And in the course of things, as we would go through the cemetery, conversations about history would come up. In the course of church, conversations about the meaning of religion. And so in light of that, what was the answer to this paradox? The answer to this paradox was that it wasn't the most important thing. They knew it was there. They were embarrassed about it. We hate being the second poorest state. It's shameful for us. We know you don't look up to us because of that. But it wasn't the most important thing. And they didn't want more money from the government. They wanted jobs. They wanted well-paid jobs. And more important than that red state paradox was what I came to think of as the deep story. Now, what is a deep story? It's a situation in life that feels true. It feels true, and you care a lot about it. And we all have a deep story, both sides. This is a book about their deep story, although in the end, I suggest what ours is. Ours, mine. And you take facts out of the deep story, you take moral judgments out of the deep story. It's just what your experience is telling you is true. It's like a dream, because it speaks in metaphors about something real for you. And in the right deep story, you're standing in line as in a pilgrimage, and the head of the hill is the American dream, and you are waiting in it. Your feet are pointed toward it. You have been in this line a long time, and your feet are tired, and you feel great deserving to move forward in it. But in a next moment in the right-wing deep story, someone is cutting ahead of you in line. You say, well, who's that? Well, it would be blacks who, through federally mandated affirmative action programs, finally have access to jobs that have always been denied them in the past. And from their point of view, even worse, have been women, more of them, who through federal affirmative action programs now have access that have been denied to them and reserved for men. And after that, there would be undocumented immigrants and refugees. They even saw the state pelican, you know, the brown pelican, very endangered, finally just rescued from extinction because of very high pollution in this oil and petrochemical center. So you have this oil-soaked brown pelican kind of wandering up, and it's getting in line ahead of you. Many people said, the liberals put animals ahead of people. So in another moment of this story, there is Barack Obama, who should be impartially supervising the line, seems to be waving to the line cutters. And so they, maybe he's a line cutter too. In fact, a lot of people said, how did his mother, she was not a rich woman, a single mom, you know, how could she afford a Harvard education and a Columbia education? They studied this biography, so they would say that, and then they would say, ooh, something fishy. They couldn't imagine that brilliant students could get full scholarships at elite colleges. That is not part of the deep story. So a little suspicion about how he rose. How did that happen? I couldn't afford that kind of education. Okay, in a final moment of this, someone ahead of the line, maybe a coastal liberal, would turn around and say, oh, you backward, Southern, prejudiced, racist, redneck. And that was the thing, that word it just made them feel, okay, I'm now at the back of the line. So then they felt, well, we're in this line, but it seemed like all of the areas through which they would seek honor were getting blocked. We're talking about downward mobility here. So they look for honor in their place of work. They're not sure, as a middle-aged guy, if they're going to keep that job. Or maybe they got laid off and had to go for a lower paid job. So they would go then for a sense of honor to their religious community. But in the society as a whole, they felt it was secularizing. It was being religious was being associated with being ignorant. And so they would turn for honor to their region of the South. Well, no, they felt looked down upon as Southerners. So there were many areas in which, or their culture that they were very proud of. That too was being, they felt, contradicted by the government. So in a way, they were in what I came to think of as an honor squeeze. So that, in a way, is the deep story that we can say excludes a number of facts. Okay, but deep stories do that. And what happens is that people know about contradictory information that contradicts their deep story. They know it, but they hold it at one remove. I think we all do that. In other words, there's a zone of knowing that isn't not knowing, but it's not embracing or accepting either. And that's where that information is. In my book, it's Appendix 3. Doesn't go away. But in people's psyches, it's on the periphery. So I went back to the people that I'd come to know, and I said, well, what about this deep story? And people would say, I live your metaphor. Lee Sherman, if you've read the book, he said, oh, you've read my mind. Others would say, well, you have to add something to that. The people who are waiting in line are paying taxes for the line cutters, and that's what galls them. Another would say, well, look, we get out of line and start somewhere else. In other words, suggesting secession and removal. So people had different endings to this deep story, which is not confined, I think, to the South. I think it's a deep story we'll find in rural areas. It's not even confined, I think, to the United States. Now, what do we do with this? Where do we go from here? I think some people, in a way, say, okay, we don't have to, if you're a liberal or progressive or Democrat, we don't have to reach out to anybody else. In fact, it's ill-advised. I don't want to. I'll give you an example of, I don't know if any of you have follow Frank Rich, who's been a New York Times columnist, writes for New York Magazine. Here's what he said. He said, forget empathy. That weakens you for the fight, right? We're in a fight, and we don't want to get softened. It's just a feel-good thing. Here's what he says. Maybe like, he was respectful, by the way, about the book, but here, maybe like Hochschild's new friends in Louisiana's oil country, he's saying about strangers, they, the right wing, will keep voting against their own interest until the industrial poisons left unregulated by their favored politicians finish them off altogether. The best course of action may be to respect their right to choose. Woo! Well, Frank Rich would hate it, but I can say I empathize with some of this rage, but he misdirects us very seriously. And what he's forgetting is that the country voted for Donald Trump, who is our president, 45%. And when you count the three branches of the federal government, the state governorships, state legislators, and you look at the blue-collar white voters, high proportion of which voted for Trump, and you look at 40% of union members voted for Trump, you have to see that we're not looking just at a red state paradox, but at a blue state paradox. How could it be that the party that's supposed to represent the working man and woman is losing working men and women by the droves? What is it we're not seeing? So I think we have to look to the great examples of crossover. It's not that left and right are going to morph. We are who we are. You know, there are differences. But I see a great number of opportunities for coalitions on particular issues. And I saw them all the time, the possibilities of them as I went around. But to look at the great models, we can see Ralph Nader actually got together with Grover Norquist, cooperating on cutting corporate welfare. That got somewhere, not as far as many of us would want. George Soros and David Koch actually jointly donated to a project to reduce prison populations. And recently I got a call from a man I'd never heard of before. He's a Democratic congressman named Ro Khanna, who represents Silicon Valley. In his constituency, there is Google, Facebook, Yahoo, Intel, and half of his constituency is Asian, as he is himself. So I wondered, well, why is he calling me? That's interesting, but why? He said, well, I have made an alliance with a Republican in Paintsville, Kentucky, which has a high proportion of unemployed coal miners. And what he has done is to get trainers from Silicon Valley to go to Paintsville and train young unemployed people on how to do coding for apps for cell phones. And if you pass the exam, and this is a whole program, it's paid, so you spend all day for a long period of time. Most people have passed. The graduating class of 30 is already out. You are offered a $40,000 a year job. I thought, what a genius thing. And it wasn't by staying inside his bubble that he came upon it. It was by reaching out. It was by looking at the whole picture. So I think gradually that what we find ourselves in is a strange situation with this global kind of cultural climate change. On the one hand, you read the papers, and it looks like all the pundits and the politicians, Congress, President is kind of pushing us in a direction of division. And yet there is a grassroots movement, I am here to tell you, going exactly the other way. If you Google something called the Bridge Alliance, which is started by a Republican, by the way, a guy I met, what it is an umbrella group of some 70, it's now 80, small organizations with names like Big Tent Nation, High from the Other Side, I like that one, Better Angels, Living Room Conversations, which is started by Joan Blades, co-founder of MoveOn.org, and I've done a number of those. In fact, I've had some people from Lake Charles come up and be our house guests and join in a living room conversation. That was really interesting. And and she went back. This was a single mom. She's in my preface. Her name is Sharon Galicia, wonderful woman. And as she went back her last night, she said, hey, I'm going to start some of these living room conversations back in Lake Charles. I've had emails from Anglican, from Episcopal church in Massachusetts that wants to team up with a church in the South. Could I help with that? There is a movement afoot, and I think it behooves us to join it. And I say that because to answer again Frank Rich, as I see it from a progressive point of view, there are three pillars of activism. One is to defend democracy, the freedom of the press, the independence of the judiciary. And many of my friends in Louisiana would join with that, are concerned about that actually also. That's the first pillar of activism. Second seems to me to find to create a platform of the Democratic Party that speaks to the real issues that exist. And the third is to reach out and learn what common ground there is. So I guess I think that's the adventure that I have just returned from. And it's an adventure that I invite you to. And it's certainly not one you have to go very far to have. But just know that you're not alone, and that what we need, I think, are the skills of a mediator, a negotiator. All of us now need to be the adults in the room and develop those skills. And I'll give you one example and then we can open out to questions, of a skill that I learned in a session in which I was the problem. It was this living room conversation in my own living room. And there were ardent Republicans and the progressives, a UC Berkeley student. We were all around, my house guests. And what we traded weren't just beliefs, but stories. And those stories are what help you identify with the other person. That's the barrier. The empathy barrier is keeping one side's stories from the other side's stories. And I was already learning something about the stories and being moved by them, about people in that room. But here's what happened. At one point, one of the Republicans said, oh, what we really need is a world without government, like the world that Milton Friedman describes in Capitalism and Freedom. Well, I happen to have read that book, not just read it, but really know that book. And I didn't have my alarm system off. So I said, oh, Milton Friedman, oh no, I've just spent 5 years in an area of the country that is suffering from the absence of regulation, and they're the second poorest. Oh no, I just kind of burst out. But I became a, little encyclopedia, a little factoid-y thing. And I sort of, the man, Republican, said, oh, I'm sorry. That really influenced me. He said, I'm sorry, I've stepped on one of your symbols. And he was right. He was right. I learned a lot. Okay, that's what I have to learn to do I have to know where the symbols are, where the emotion-laden kind of stories are, and I have to go very carefully and respectfully with regard to them. So we have a journey that's not just from one geographical area to another and one informational area to another, but really from one psychological state of defendedness to a state of openness. The people I met, some of whom I really call new friends, were just as open, capable of ambivalence and doubt as I am. And I feel larger for knowing them, and I think the whole country at this moment would be a larger and more united country if we could all do that. Thank you.
So if you have questions, come to either of these microphones. The microphone on this side is up there, if you want to bring it down. And Arlie will take the questions up one from each other, and we hope we can get to them all, but we'll try.
And before we begin, I just want to say that actually in the audience is one of my new friends. I met a couple at Aunt Ruby's B&B, which is where I stayed in Lake Charles, and while they lived near here, they were visiting a daughter there, and this new friend, Ron Alfieri, said, hey, I'm on the right, but let's trade media. Why don't you have me watch some program, let's say Rachel Maddow, my side, I'm going to have you watch Bill O'Reilly on Fox News. And for a month we did that. It was a brilliant idea, and thank you, Ron. He really got me going. Yeah.
Thank you so much. I'm Nancy Young from Madison, Wisconsin, where we've gone through a jolt also in trying to figure out what is happening in our state. And your research reminds me so much of what research is being done by the University of Wisconsin woman researcher who has gone up to the northern part of the state to find out what people are thinking and why they are feeling left out.
That's Catherine.
Catherine Crowley, yeah. I thought you might know and have
She's great.
gotten in touch with each other. You remind me very much of her. And she's come back with some very important information also, similar to yours, where we have to try to get in there and understand what's going on and try to come up with ways to change the way we approach the issues, because we certainly didn't want to go through what we've been through and never again, I hope.
Right.
So I'm wondering if you and Catherine, in some ways, have been able to work together or know each other, and what you might offer for us in Wisconsin.
We were, I don't know her well, but we immediately liked each other and felt on the same page. And we met in Baltimore, where each of us were panelists at the Democratic congressional recess. And I have to say, I was not impressed with the Democrats, but I'm very impressed with Catherine. What she basically is saying that is rural America feels very ignored and unappreciated, which I think is completely a very important insight to add. You know, it's occurred to me, even our language doesn't have that appreciation built into it. We think of Wall Street versus Main Street, but what does Main Street represent? You think of the local stationer or, you know, a grocery store that you own a store, let's say. But Main Street doesn't really tell you about the guy that climbed the telephone pole to put in, you know, the telephone wires, or who was digging the ditches to put in the plumbing, who made Main Street. And it doesn't tell you about the farmers who are on the tractors who are producing the food that really feeds Main Street. I think we really even need to expand our language and be careful about the images that come up. Yeah,
Thank you very
you.
much, yes.
Next, over on this side.
Oh, sorry.
Hi, I'm Bruce from Minnesota, and I'm looking forward to reading your book. Since coming to Chautauqua on Saturday, I've spent very little time on Facebook, but last night before bed, I had my 5th post, and all of them from different sources, but there are groups downplaying the value of higher education. And the one last night said that there are now conservative groups who actually say a college university education is bad for the country. Do you have any thoughts on that, or did you have any in your study?
As someone who spent her entire life, how do I feel about that? Well, you know, if I were in conversation with a person who felt that, I would first ask what they think of when they think of higher education. And did they know anybody who had a higher education? What is higher, what is lower? I would first explore the concept of an education, and what do they think about books? Are they, you know, Shakespeare, Dante, you know? And I bet that through the course of that, you know, it would kind of soften, because what image is brought to mind, sadly, is Berkeley, California's anarchists who, in black and black bloc, tragically, I am now trying to talk to some of those people. I have another empathy wall over there. And denounce violence. They're thinking of, you know, they imagine spoiled kids. Well, they don't know that 3/4 of them are also working full-time jobs while they're going. It's just kind of altering the picture. So I wouldn't, you know, grab the bait right away. I would just talk about the picture and what it's based on. Yeah.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Will, and I've been coming to Chautauqua for over 60 years. My question has to do with something I heard Robert Reich say. You may have heard it too. He was on a PBS discussion, of all places. And he said, I kept getting this message from the producers in my earpiece that I should be angry. And he said, well, I wasn't angry, but they kept telling me I should get angry. And my question is, to what extent do you think the entertainment needs of our media are driving this divisiveness?
Oh, wow. What a wonderful question, huh? Oh, boy. Yeah, I hadn't heard that. It's extraordinary. And yes, this is a Punch and Judy show, almost. And it reduces us to 7-year-olds watching Punch and Judy. So what can we do about that? I think it's true. It's been great for the media. They're earning a lot of money watching us anxiously watching these fights. Yeah, probably something you have to work on in 2 ways. One is reduce the anxiety we're all feeling by really kind of reaching out and getting to know people. And the other is, yeah, faulting the media for doing that. Yeah, thank you. Yeah. Hi.
Hi, thank you for the talk. I appreciate the part, and I'm learning a lot from the empathy that you're talking about, learning the stories. And I've tried twice, once successfully, once unsuccessfully, to try to bridge my liberal viewpoint with conservative friends of mine. But I'm at the point where I can't talk to them anymore. And the reason for that is not so much the story, but the denial of basic facts, like where was Obama born,
Right.
death panels on Medicare, climate change. And I don't understand how I could pull that into the empathy part, and any thoughts you have on that would be greatly appreciated.
Yeah, that's a great question too, and I think I would go back to the idea that my friend Ron Alfieri suggests of each side spending a month listening to the other side's news. I felt, in fact, that I was talking to very good people, smart people, good-hearted people who live in a different truth, and that this really is huge. But what I think we need to do, I don't have any magic answers. I just am issuing an invitation for us all to stand up and take it as our job. We need more adults in the room, and take leadership positions in perhaps putting different blogs out or altering what it is people are listening to. And so what would that be? I mean, none of us have access to Bill O'Reilly's position, I think, but write about it, talk about it, get out, run for local office. And in those venues, say what higher education means, say what global warming could mean. Yeah.
Again, that's
Yeah.
Hi, I grew up here in New York State, but for the last 30 years, I've been living in Shreveport, Louisiana.
Okay. Oh, wow.
Oh, wow. The first question you're asked in any conversation is, what church do you go to?
Yeah, yeah.
On Monday, the question was posed by a speaker. His topic was the demise of Christian America. And are these groups willing to come to the table as guests instead of as a host?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that speaks very much to the deep story that you talk about, that these people feel that there are people in front of them.
Yeah.
They really, I mean, you've been there. You know how deep that is, that religious feeling.
Yeah,
And I'd just like you to address that.
Yeah. And I didn't get asked that question, but I did ask it, where do you live? Are you in Northern California or Southern California? And Northern, oh.
Well, if you live there, that's,
Yeah.
what church do you go to?
That's right. Yeah, that's right. So feelings do run extremely deep, which is why we're told never to talk about politics or religion at Thanksgiving dinner. But I came to feel this, that I'll tell you one story that told me something. A deeply, deeply religious woman who told a heartbreaking story of growing up as one of 5. Her father was drunk and left her mother, and we never went to our mother for problems. I mean, she was working 2 jobs supporting us, and it was that story. And then the mother remarried a molester. It was terrible. And she had an epiphany. She was reborn in a moment of truth for her, after which her life improved. And I had all of the instability. She left her house at age 15. This is not an unusual story. There are a lot of people, they talk family values, but the families are very challenged, and very difficult experiences are being described. It doesn't come out at first, but if you come back and back and back, these painful stories do emerge. And there were people who felt, the way she talked about the Constitution or the flag and the Bible. I understood she needed it not to be challenged in any way. It stood for, emotionally, kind of the stability that was very much missing in her life. So I guess I kept to think that we have to think about what things are emotionally important in the context that they become that important. Doesn't mean we can't talk about it, but it means we have to talk around those moments of deep symbolization. Yeah.
Lawrence says from San Diego. I enjoyed your book so much, I'm now listening to the audio version.
Oh, thank you.
I'm wondering what kind of feedback you've gotten from the people you portrayed so well in the book. Do they feel they were treated fairly? Have they changed any of their opinions?
No. Yes, after the book was published, I gave copies of the book to everybody that I'd interviewed or who had helped me. And then 3 weeks later, I went down back to Baton Rouge and Lake Charles to put on dinners for people. And one woman, they liked this book. And one woman had a shirt on, Janice Areno in the book. She's real toughy. And she had this jacket on. She said, she came up to me at the dinner and said, "Do you want to see what I have under this jacket?" I said, "Yeah." And so it said, "Adorable deplorables." And she said, "We're getting in a truck and we're going to go around this country and I'm going to send you one of those, but you have to wear it." I said, "No promises." So they did. And I hear from Lee Sherman. He was the one that was told by his boss to dump toxic waste in a bayou that another family I came to know extremely well suffered a great deal from. And he loved it. In fact, he was just in a parade. He's now in his 82, and he's in a mobile wheelchair in a parade in DeRidder for breast cancer. And so he had his American flags, and I'm going to put this in the preface to the paperback, and there he is in this parade. He said, I held up the back. He was slower, so he's a social activist, and he was in this parade, and 2 men came up to him. "Hey, you're not the guy who dumped the toxic waste. You're in that book." So they're reading it, and part of me is a little frightened of that, but basically it's good, and they do feel they understood from the get-go that we had differences, but it was a question of, did I understand their position? And they do feel that. I'm very pleased to say.
I'd like to make a suggestion, because we're out of time, but several people are standing. Let's see if each of you can create your question in one sentence, and then let Arlie decide how she's going to handle those 5 sentences. I'll help.
All right, okay.
Good afternoon. I'm Jack Huber from Atlanta, Georgia, and I fully appreciate what you're saying about a grassroots effort, and it could really be spectacular. Well, the question is, we're supposed to have leadership in Congress leading this country. We've elected these people to do that, and it's such a sadness that they themselves, at a leadership area and position, seem to be doing such a poor job of getting together and understanding each other and their points of view.
Thank you. Now let's take yours.
Run for Congress.
My question
all
is,
5 of them and then-
what is the sequel? What did you learn that you now wish to pursue in a new study and a new book?
Yeah,
And your question?
okay.
I'm writing it down.
You want to go with yours?
Yes. If you complicate the deep story to add that standing in line also involves standing upon the backs of black folks, etc., is that knowledge that can ever be integrated into their own deep story, or does that just remain at a distance?
Okay.
I did it.
You did.
You did.
This isn't a question. It's, I wanted to add something to your response to the man who didn't know what to do because of the people who he was talking to who denied the facts. I just wanted to add prayer because I've found when you pray about a situation and keep on praying before each encounter, that can really change things, especially when things seem unchangeable.
Okay, and yours?
Mine's a comment because I'm Ron Alfieri. All I have to say is that if Arlie, the ultra-liberal, and Ron, the ultra-conservative, can meet in a B&B and over these 8 or 9 years develop a deep friendship, although our politics are miles apart, you know, if not you, who? And if not now, when?
Oh. So that can be your ending if you want it to.
Let's end there. Goodbye and good luck.